Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are undertaking a really extraordinary analysis, actually. We're tracing the technological DNA, you could say, of national defense over, well, 60 years. We're looking specifically at a fascinating case study in how institutions adapt the evolution of the Pakistan Army. And we're using sources that track its journey, basically, from radar to AI warfare.
That's right. And our mission for you, the listener, is really to get beyond the sort of day-to-day headlines. We want to help you understand this transformation of warfare from, steel to silicon, as the sources put it. This isn't just a history lesson. It's more of a structural analysis. We're looking at how technology redefined defense priorities across different generations of leadership, focusing really intently on the strategic thinking, the decisions behind adopting these technologies.
Yeah, and the sources lay out this really compelling kind of overarching story that guides this whole deep dive. They paint a picture of a deliberate, long-term strategic shift. It's quite clear. We're essentially witnessing the evolution from a military that was, well, primarily focused on physical presence, conventional weapons, what the sources call a reliance on muscle, to a force that prioritizes information, data processing, algorithms, and a definite move toward mind.
And to make sense of this huge decades-long transformation, we've structured the analysis chronologically. We're looking at it through 4 distinct military eras, each one really defining a specific technological leap. We're looking at how foundational defense assets sort of gave way to strategic deterrence capabilities, which then in turn yielded to digital dominance. And finally, that leads us right up to the current frontier of intelligent autonomous systems.
So we'll track this whole process, the need for it, the implementation, and the legacy, really, of each phase. We start right where the electronics revolution began for them, with introducing basic radar and professionalizing mechanized forces. It's a study in how organizations actually commit to a technological future, and we're jumping right in with that first generation of modernization.
Okay, let's unpack these foundations then. The very beginning of technological defense and, the challenges that come with being an early adopter. It's never simple.
Okay, let's really unpack this first major step. We're focusing on the time of Field Marshal Ayub Khan back in the 1960s. This era, it really represents the moment when the military leadership decided, look, sheer manpower isn't enough anymore. Technology needed to be baked right into the defense foundation. This was that first big move from, infantry-centric ideas to the early electronic age.
Exactly. And the commitment here was, well, it was twofold and deeply strategic. The sources highlight 2 key technological commitments from this period. First, the introduction of a functional, centralized radar technology network. That was huge. Second, there was an intense focus on mechanized warfare, really professionalizing the armored divisions. Together, these 2 systems laid the groundwork for modern combined arms operations as we understand them.
Right. And when we talk about radar in the 1960s, we need to kind of put ourselves back there. Understand the logistics. This wasn't like off-the-shelf, easy-to-use tech we have today. Not at all. Installing a comprehensive radar network meant acquiring these massive, really expensive foreign systems. It meant training highly specialized technicians just to run them, to maintain them, and establishing secure communication links so the information could be reported in real time. So what was the practical implication? What did having a functioning radar network actually do for them back then?
Well, look, before this, defense was essentially reactive. It was a reaction to visual contact, or maybe relying on basic ground observation posts. Very limited. Radar provided strategic, all-weather, 204/7 coverage. That's the first thing. And critically, it provided early warning. It basically converted air defense from just a passive perimeter thing into an active strategic asset. This informational advantage, it's invaluable because it provides lead time, crucial lead time. You know where and when an air threat is coming, which allows your air defense assets to be positioned optimally, and interceptor aircraft could be scrambled with maximum efficiency. It's really the difference between guessing and knowing.
That makes sense, knowing versus guessing. And the sources note that this radar advantage, it was combined with that other big investment, the investment in high-speed, concentrated firepower. Establishing these armored divisions, that meant way more than just buying tanks, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely, far more. It meant overhauling entire logistics chains to support, high fuel consumption. Tanks are thirsty. It meant creating dedicated repair and recovery units, specialized units, and maybe most importantly, training crews in maneuver warfare. That ability to use speed and shock for deep penetration, for decisive action.
So the armored division is kind of the ultimate expression of conventional striking power then?
Pretty much, yes. For that era, definitely. It requires robust infrastructure, standardized maintenance protocols, and sophisticated high-speed communications that could actually function reliably across vast distances on a battlefield. This was a massive resource commitment, a huge chunk of the budget. And it was designed specifically to shift the balance of ground power away from slower infantry movements toward, well, rapid maneuverability, speed and shock.
And the sources, they really confirm the immediate strategic value of pulling these two things together. They note that this combination, the, let's say, informational eyes of the radar and the striking fist of the armored divisions, it provided a demonstrable edge in the 1965 war. Now, for organizational leaders, that is the validation point, isn't it? Seeing it work in practice.
Exactly. That's the proof. It validates the immense resource drain, the effort the political capital spent on modernizing. But this leads us to the first really critical lesson the sources emphasize. And it's one that, frankly, goes beyond just military strategy. The lesson is early adoption of technology is the first layer of defense.
Okay, unpack that a bit. First layer of defense, what does that really mean?
It suggests that the advantage isn't just derived from the technology itself, the radar or the tanks. It comes from the institutional willingness to absorb the operational complexity. And importantly, the political risk that always comes with being an early adopter, pushing the envelope.
You bring up political risk. That's interesting. It's easy for us now, decades later, to look back and say, yeah, they adopted radar, good move. But what were the inherent challenges of doing that then? Weren't these systems heavily dependent on foreign suppliers? Didn't that create a vulnerability?
Ah, yes. That is the essential friction point of this whole era, and something the sources allude to, maybe implicitly. While early adoption gives you a tactical edge, absolutely. Reliance on foreign systems means you're vulnerable to diplomatic pressure, to spare part embargoes, and just the sheer high cost of maintenance contracts from overseas suppliers. So the organizational challenge wasn't just operating the radar, it was sustaining it, especially under duress, like in wartime or under sanctions.
Right.
This forced them, over time, to develop at least a basic level of technical self-reliance, maybe some reverse engineering capabilities, even if the core technology was still imported. They had to learn to fix things themselves.
So, okay. Early action buys you time, it buys you advantage, but it simultaneously forces the institution to learn about logistical independence, about self-sufficiency. If we take that lesson and apply it to, say, modern organizational strategy, it means that adopting AI or complex digital systems today is only half the battle, right? The other half is creating the sovereign expertise, the in-house knowledge to maintain and evolve those systems independently.
Precisely. That's the enduring lesson. This era established the importance of conventional strength, powered by early electronics. However, there was a limitation to this era's technology. It was primarily tactical. It helped win battles, sure, but it didn't necessarily prevent larger conflicts, nor did it offer a strategic counterweight to, say, major regional power disparities. So the next leap, driven by a very different kind of strategic necessity, had to move beyond just gaining an edge. It had to move towards establishing full-spectrum deterrence, a bigger goal.
That sets the stage perfectly for the next phase, doesn't it? The massive pivot towards strategic capabilities. Let's get into that.
Right. So moving into the period under General Zia-ul-Haq's command, we see this massive strategic pivot. It's driven largely by geopolitical realities, the regional security environment, and frankly, the need for grand strategy. The goals shifted radically here. It wasn't just about achieving tactical superiority on the battlefield anymore. It became about fundamentally altering the strategic balance of the entire region. This is when the focus really transitioned from defensive systems like radar to offensive, high-impact strategic capabilities.
And this transition, it required an immense, often secretive and technically incredibly demanding commitment. This was Pakistan's entrance into the missile age, a huge undertaking. It was really the moment technology transformed from just being an operational enhancer, helping troops fight better, to becoming a guarantor of national survival itself.
Yes. The sources confirm this was a period of very high-stakes indigenous development, done largely in-house. We see the beginning of two key programs that would really define the strategic capability for decades, the HOT program and the Gauri program. And these weren't just, cool-sounding acronyms. They represented a massive national commitment, a commitment to master complex fields like propulsion, guidance systems, advanced metallurgy, all while operating under intense international scrutiny and often sanctions.
Okay, for the listener who might not know the sort of technical distinction here. Can you break down the strategic difference between the Hot Half and the Gowrie series? What were they each designed to actually achieve?
Certainly. So the HOTS program is generally associated with a range of short to medium range systems, often focusing on battlefield support roles, providing precision strikes, things like that. And later it also involved the development of cruise missiles. Now, cruise missiles are defined by their ability to fly low using terrain-hugging navigation. This makes them very difficult to detect and intercept by traditional air defenses. They prioritize precision and stealth.
Okay, so HOTF is more about precision, stealth, maybe shorter ranges. What about the Gowrie?
The Gowrie, by contrast, represents the commitment to longer-range ballistic missiles. Ballistic missiles, once they're launched, follow a high, arching, parabolic trajectory, much higher than cruise missiles. They are designed primarily for strategic reach, capable of targeting deep into an opponent's territory, hundreds, even thousands of kilometers. The Gowrie program was really instrumental in expanding the geographical scope of strategic deterrence, ensuring that the country had the necessary range to, well, communicate its resolve across the entire regional theater. So this commitment to both types, cruise for precision and stealth, ballistic for range and speed, showed a really comprehensive approach to strategic delivery systems. They weren't putting all their eggs in one basket.
And underpinning the viability, the credibility of these powerful long-range systems was the parallel and absolutely crucial development of nuclear delivery systems taking shape during this time. This isn't just about having the warhead itself, is it? It's about the incredibly complex engineering required to miniaturize it, to make it secure, rugged, and to reliably deliver that capability under potentially adverse conditions, like during a conflict.
Exactly right. Without a reliable delivery platform, the strategic value of any nuclear capability remains purely theoretical. It's just an idea. The missile systems, the Hafe series, the Gowrie series, these were the means to ensure credibility, that the capability was real and usable. Strategic weapon viability really depends on three things. Survivability, can it survive a first strike? Reliability, will it launch and fly correctly? And penetrability, can it get past defenses? Investing heavily in indigenous missile technology was the path chosen to minimize reliance on unpredictable foreign suppliers. Suppliers who might, collapse under sanctions or political pressure, which was a constant threat during this whole development period.
So that really is the core of the strategic shift in this era, isn't it? Technology's role evolved so drastically. It was no longer just about strength for the battlefield, something you deploy during a war. It became a permanent psychological factor in grand strategy, something designed explicitly to prevent conflict by altering the opponent's calculus before anything even starts.
Absolutely. And this brings us neatly to the second key lesson extracted from this era in the sources. Technology became not just strength, but deterrence. And the difference between those two words is monumental in strategic terms.
Explain that difference for us. Strength versus deterrence.
Okay. Strength, in the conventional sense, is the ability to physically overpower an opponent on the battlefield. More tanks, more planes, better tactics maybe. Deterrence, in this specific context, is the capacity to inflict unacceptable damage on an opponent, even if that opponent is conventionally superior in terms of numbers or traditional military might. It changes the game entirely.
So, deterrence is essentially the political application of a technological capability, strategic message. It shifts the focus away from winning a localized skirmish or battle to eliminating the desire and the potential adversary to even start the conflict in the first place. How? By raising the potential cost way beyond any conceivable benefit. Beyond comprehension, really. It's a huge leap in how technology is applied from a tactical investment to building a strategic security architecture.
Precisely. And this strategic security architecture, it demanded disciplined, long-term resource allocation, often diverting significant funds, scientific talent, human capital into highly specialized research institutions, often very secretively. The logistical challenges were just immense, managing the sheer technical complexity of rocket science, guidance systems, nuclear physics, all while operating under this veil of extreme secrecy and international pressure. The success of these programs ultimately defined a certain national self-reliance in a critical geopolitical domain.
Okay, so the missile age was about mastering the physics of flight, propulsion, materials, science, all to create physical leverage, strategic weight. But as the world moved into the new millennium, towards the late 90s and early 2000s, the most valuable assets, they stopped just flying through the air and started flowing through wires of networks as data. And this forced the military, like militaries everywhere, to shift its focus once again, moving from the large physical systems of the deterrence age to the invisible, pervasive network systems of the digital age.
That's right. The battlefield, in a very real sense, moved into the wire. into cyberspace.
Right. This is where the narrative truly accelerates into the realm we kind of recognize today, the modern era. General Pervez Musharraf's command is marked by this clear recognition, this insight, that the core assets of modern defense were increasingly digital, not just physical anymore. The sources state he had the foresight, the understanding that future wars would be digital. Now, this required a massive institutional pivot, a whole new way of thinking, recognizing that the electronic spectrum itself, the pathways for data, was the new domain of conflict.
Yes, and that insight was absolutely critical because it recognized that modern society, everything from banking and energy grids to military logistics and command systems, runs on data streams and networked infrastructure. If an opponent can paralyze your communications, shut down your power grid, or corrupt your critical infrastructure digitally, your conventional strengths, no matter how great on paper, is rendered blind, deaf, and immobile, pretty much useless. So responding proactively to this emerging reality meant establishing dominance, or at least resilience, in this new digital realm.
And to combat this new kind of threat, the sources indicate several critical initiatives were launched during this period. First and foremost, the launching of Pakistan's Cyber Defense Initiative. Okay, what does establishing a national cyber defense initiative actually entail? It sounds big, but what does it mean in practice, beyond just, say, technical upgrades like firewalls?
It means building sovereign capability.
Yeah.
National capability. It's much more than just buying software. It means creating dedicated, highly secure command structures, specifically designed to operate effectively in the digital domain. It means actively recruiting and training specialized talent people skilled in digital counterintelligence, network hardening, vulnerability assessment, and, crucially, offensive cyber operations as well. It's not just defense. It's really moving beyond simple perimeter defense, like firewalls, to active, adaptive cyber warfare, where the ability to control data flow, ensure data integrity, and disrupt the enemy's digital capabilities becomes paramount.
Okay, so building the command structure, the talent pipeline, and this massive digital push, it was supported by an expansion of surveillance and communication networks, right?
Absolutely. Modernization in this era meant integrating pretty much every element, from the individual soldier on the ground to satellites in orbit via secure, encrypted digital links. We're talking about building a vast, interconnected digital nervous system for the entire military. A nervous system that must be designed from the ground up to resist constant attack, constant attempts at intrusion and disruption.
And crucially, this digital integration wasn't just limited to communications and networks. It involved the general modernization of weapon systems to integrate digital components. Can you give an example of that?
Sure. Think about older platforms, maybe tanks or artillery pieces, receiving modern digital fire control systems, or adding GPS navigation and network target acquisition capabilities to existing aircraft or vehicles. This made existing hardware, platforms that might have been decades old, exponentially more precise, more effective, and more interoperable with newer systems, getting more bang for the buck from older kit.
Right, leveraging digital upgrades. That leads directly then to the specialized focus on electronic warfare capabilities, EW.
Now, for a listener who hears EW but doesn't really grasp its practical application, how exactly does electronic warfare function to, well, win a digital conflict? What does it do?
Okay, electronic warfare, or EW, is essentially about controlling the electromagnetic spectrum. Think of it as the invisible highway upon which all modern military systems communicate, sense, and navigate. Radio waves, radar beams, GPS signals, data links, it all travels through the spectrum. EW basically breaks down into three core components, which the sources implicitly cover when they discuss this. First, electronic support measures. ESM, this is basically listening, passively collecting signals, intelligence, SIGINT, to understand the enemy's electronic order of battle. Where are their radars? What frequencies are their radios using? What kind of sensors do they have active? Building that electronic picture.
Okay, so listening first, what's next? Second, electronic attack, EA. This is the active part. Jamming, actively disrupting the enemy's use of the spectrum. This could mean scrambling their radio communications so they can't talk to each other. It could mean blinding their radar systems so they can't see incoming threats. Or even spoofing GPS signals to misguide their precision munitions, making them miss their targets. It's about denying the enemy the use of the spectrum.
And the third part.
Third is electronic protection, EP. This is about hardening your own systems, protecting your own forces from the enemy's EA attempts, ensuring your own communication links remain robust, encrypted, and resistant to jamming, making sure your own radar can operate effectively even in a contested electronic environment. It's defense for your own signals.
ESM, EA, EP, listening, attacking, protecting. So EW is kind of the ultimate force multiplier in this digital age, isn't it? targeting the opponent's ability to coordinate, to communicate, to see, regardless of how many tanks or planes they might have on paper.
Precisely. It attacks the nervous system of the opposing force. And this intellectual shift, this focus on the digital and electronic realms, it redefined the necessary skill set of the soldier. The sources provide a really powerful lesson, a takeaway from this era. The 21st century soldier needs both a gun and a keyboard.
The hybrid soldier concept. Okay, let's explore that. It sounds important, but what does it actually mean in practice? Because it represents, as you said, probably the most significant institutional training challenge of the era. How do you take someone trained for kinetic combat and add these complex technical skills?
Well, it means the focus shifts from a purely kinetic skill set, marksmanship, tactics, physical fitness, to one that blends traditional combat proficiency with a high degree of technical sophistication. They need both sets of skills now.
Can you maybe provide a concrete scenario for the listener, just to illustrate how the gun and the keyboard merge in a real-world situation?
Sure. Let's imagine a forward observation team, maybe calling in artillery support. In the past, say 30 years ago, they would use binoculars to spot the target, a map and compass to get coordinates, and radio, maybe an analog radio to call back to the guns. Today, that same soldier is operating a networked battle management system. That's the keyboard part. This system likely provides real-time satellite imagery, integrates signals intelligence data from drones or other sensors, and securely feeds precise targeting coordinates directly to smart artillery or even loitering munitions. So, that soldier must not only know how to operate their personal weapon effectively, the gun like, but they also need to know how to secure their digital communication link against hacking or jamming. They need to manage the flow of data, maybe interpret sensor information, and operate specialized electronic intelligence gathering equipment right there on the front line. Digital literacy in this contest becomes almost as essential as marksmanship or fieldcraft.
Wow. That requires deep investment then, not just in buying the hardware, the fancy tablets and radios, but in specialized technical recruitment, maybe bringing in people with different backgrounds, and completely revamping education and training pipelines at every level of the military. It demands that the institution overcomes that natural inertia, the tendency to rely solely on traditional military training methods. That must have been tough.
Absolutely, it's a huge cultural and organizational shift, but the sources suggest that the commitment under Musharraf successfully bridged that gap. The gap between the heavy hardware deterrence focus of the Zia era and the information-centric battlefield that was rapidly emerging. But, the digital realm, it doesn't stand still. It continues to accelerate. The sheer speed and complexity of cyber conflict, the overwhelming volume of data being generated by sensors everywhere, it soon started to exceed human capacity to effectively manage and analyze in real time. And that necessity is what drove the next big leap, the one we're currently in.
Okay, so we've moved from physical machines to mastering strategic physics with missiles to managing the network and the spectrum. Now we enter the age where intelligence itself, artificial intelligence, starts to think and potentially act on its own, the AI frontier.
Exactly. We have arrived at the present day, or at least the very near present. The sources highlight Field Marshal Syed Asim Munir's command as marking this critical entry point into the AI frontier. And this isn't just about using digital tools more effectively. It's fundamentally different. It's about deploying intelligence, artificial intelligence that can learn from data, synthesize vast amounts of information, and potentially make command recommendations or even take actions faster and perhaps more precisely than any human possibly could.
So this is really the era of accelerated decision-making, isn't it? Where data supremacy isn't just about having the data, but about leveraging it instantly to generate operational advantage. What are the key AI applications that the sources indicate are being prioritized right now?
Well, there seem to be three main vectors, or areas of focus, emerging: autonomy, intelligence gathering and analysis, and cyber defense. They all rely heavily on AI, starting with the kinetic side, the things that move and strike. The utilization of smart drones and the development of truly autonomous systems. Drones are rapidly transitioning from being just human-piloted remote vehicles, predators or reapers, to becoming platforms that use embedded AI for complex tasks like navigation in GPS-denied environments, sensor fusion, combining data from multiple sensors, cooperative swarm tactics where drones work together, and even independent target recognition based on learned patterns.
Okay, what's the real difference between a smart drone and a fully autonomous system in this military context? Is there a clear line?
It's maybe more of a spectrum, but there's a key distinction. A smart drone generally assists the human operator. It might stabilize itself, use AI to identify potential targets for the human to confirm or navigate complex terrain automatically, but the human is still fundamentally in the loop for critical decisions, especially lethal action. A fully autonomous system, however, could potentially execute an entire mission profile, say, search a designated area, identify a predefined type of target, track it, and perhaps even engage it based on preset rules of engagement without continuous human intervention or approval for every step. The drive towards greater autonomy is largely fueled by the need for operational continuity in environments where communication links might be jammed, severed, or simply too slow for the pace of combat.
Right. And this move towards autonomy, it feeds directly into what the sources describe as the central intellectual tool of this entire AI era, predictive battlefield analytics. Now, that sounds like the ultimate form of strategic intelligence, almost like seeing the future. How does it actually function?
Predictive battlefield analytics really takes the concept of intelligence gathering and analysis to its logical extreme, powered by AI. It relies on feeding massive, incredibly complex data streams, petabytes of data, into highly sophisticated AI models. This data comes from everywhere: satellites, airborne surveillance platforms, ground sensors, signals, intelligence intercepts, cyber network monitoring, even open source information like social media or news reports. The sheer scale of this data ingestion is often what people refer to when they talk about big data applications in the military context.
Okay, can you break down how this moves beyond just describing what happened to predicting what will happen, from descriptive to prescriptive for the listener?
Sure. Descriptive analysis tells you what has happened. For example, the enemy moved 2 battalions to Sector X yesterday. Traditional intelligence analysis often stops around there, maybe adding some context. Predictive, or even better, prescriptive analytics aims to tell you what will likely happen next and, crucially, what you should do about it. For instance, based on analyzing logistics movements, observed road conditions, historical enemy maneuver patterns from previous conflicts, and current electronic signatures, the AI calculates that the enemy force has an 80% probability of launching an attack through Valley Z in the next 18 hours. That's predictive. Furthermore, it might recommend a specific preemptive countermaneuver, let's call it attack route A. Why? Because the AI had already modeled perhaps 10,000 different scenarios and found that this particular route has a 90% probability of success if it's executed within the next 15 minutes. That's prescriptive, suggesting a course of action.
Wow, that ability to process thousands of variables, model countless scenarios, and generate near instantaneous data-backed recommendations for courses of action. That must be the source of the real-time command precision mentioned in the sources. It basically eliminates human reaction time, human cognitive limits, as a bottleneck in the decision cycle.
Precisely. That's the goal. The ODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act, gets compressed dramatically. The challenge, of course, for human commanders is learning when and how much to trust the AI's recommendations, especially when those recommendations might contradict human intuition, established doctrine, or years of personal experience. This requires a profound shift in command culture, in doctrine development, really integrating the data-backed decision into standard operating procedures. How do you verify the AI isn't wrong?
A huge challenge. And of course, the defense of this entire data-driven enterprise must also be intelligent. We see the discussion in the sources of AI-powered cyber shields designed to protect military networks and critical national infrastructure. How do these differ from older cyber defenses?
They are fundamentally different. This is non-negotiable in the age of pervasive digital warfare. Traditional cyber defense, like antivirus software or firewalls, often relies on recognizing known threats, looking for specific malicious code signatures, or known attack patterns. It's reactive. AI-powered cyber shields, by contrast, use machine learning to establish a baseline of normal network behavior. Then they look for anomalous behavior, any traffic or activity that deviates significantly from that established norm, even if the specific attack method or malware signature has never been seen before. This is crucial for catching zero-day threats. This allows the AI system to potentially detect and neutralize sophisticated novel attacks in milliseconds, a speed that no human analyst team could ever hope to match. And this protects not just the military networks themselves, but also the essential national infrastructure power grids, communication networks, financial systems that the military relies upon.
Okay. This convergence, then, of predictive offense using AI and autonomous AI-driven defense, it leads to the final and perhaps the most profound lesson derived from this entire 60-year timeline. Intelligence, not numbers, now defines power.
That really challenges everything we thought we knew about military might, doesn't it?
It fundamentally overturns centuries of military doctrine, where size, mass, numbers often equated to strength. If intelligence, meaning access to data, processing power, sophisticated algorithms, predictive capability, truly defines power, then a smaller, perhaps more technologically agile force, armed with superior data and predictive analytics, could potentially neutralize or defeat a conventionally larger but technologically less mature adversary. The emphasis shifts entirely from accumulating raw material resources, tanks, soldiers, ships, to cultivating intellectual resources, data scientists, AI engineers, network architects, superior algorithms.
But doesn't this hyper-reliance on incredibly sophisticated, probably very expensive AI infrastructure make the organization vulnerable in a different way? What's the institutional cost and risk associated with this deep dependency on AI? Well, the risk is immense, and it's primarily financial and technical, but also strategic. The cost of acquiring and maintaining the cutting-edge computational infrastructure needed for large-scale AI, the cost of attracting and retaining highly specialized data scientists and AI engineers who are in demand globally, and the need for continuously updating AI models as the environment changes and adversaries adapt, it's staggering. Constant investment is required. Strategically, if the opponent can successfully disrupt the data flow that feeds the AI, or worse, if they can subtly corrupt the data, feed the AI false or biased information without detection, then the prescriptive guidance the AI provides could become actively harmful, even catastrophic. The saying, garbage in, garbage out, applies with terrifying force here. So the institutional risk profile is arguably higher now in some ways because the entire structure's effectiveness relies so heavily on the integrity and availability of its information backbone. The power is concentrated in the data, making that data, and the systems that process it, the ultimate strategic target.
Right. So the ultimate synthesis of this era, this final stage, is that the journey began with a very physical necessity, seeing threats with early warning radar. And it has culminated, for now at least, in an intellectual necessity mastering AI for predictive analytics and autonomous action. The institution has evolved from mastering physical hardware to mastering data flow, algorithmic power, and cognitive speed.
Exactly. And that incredible arc of strategic adaptation, that's the legacy we really need to summarize now for the listener, pulling it all together.
Okay, let's do that. Let's pull all four of these distinct eras together for a comprehensive synthesis. Just to provide you, the listener, with a really clear timeline of this institutional transformation we've been discussing. We're essentially tracking the evolution of the defense domain itself, watching it move from contests over physical territory to battles for intellectual superiority.
Yes, and this comparative review, looking back across the decades, it really crystallizes this narrative of continuous and crucially strategically disciplined adaptation.
So first, back in the 1960s under Ayub Khan, we established the physical foundations. This was the age of radar and mechanized warfare. The main focus then was on achieving tactical parity, getting on a level playing field, and establishing mobile, concentrated firepower with those armored divisions, using early electronics like radar for that crucial informational advantage.
Then came the shift driven by strategic necessity under General Zia-ul-Haq, a different focus. This was the era of missile and nuclear command, the big strategic deterrence. Here, the role of technology shifted fundamentally from just achieving parity to establishing strategic deterrence, fundamentally altering the calculus of conflict through developing indigenous long-range capabilities like the Hafren and Gauri missile programs alongside the nuclear aspect.
The third major leap we discussed was recognizing the new domain of warfare under General Pervez Musharraf. This phase established cyber and electronic systems as central. The battlefield explicitly expanded to include the electromagnetic spectrum and cyberspace, forcing the creation of that hybrid soldier concept we talked about, and building focused electronic attack and defense capabilities, EW.
And finally, that brings us to the current command under Field Marshal Syed Asim Munir. This era is focused squarely on the AI and autonomous warfare frontier. The emphasis now is overwhelmingly on intelligence, on predictive analytics, on maximizing speed and precision through autonomous systems, smart drones, and those AI-powered cyber shields.
Okay. Looking at this entire timeline then, from the huge logistical challenge of just maintaining foreign-bought radar systems in the 1960s to dealing with the immense algorithmic complexity of 2020's AI models, there seems to be a consistent, overarching legacy or theme that connects all these different technological adoption periods. The sources define it quite specifically, not as just spending money on tech, but as modernization with discipline and strategy.
That phrase, discipline and strategy, is absolutely crucial, I think. It implies, or states, that technology was seemingly never acquired just for its own sake, just to have the latest gadget. It was consistently integrated based on a clear, perceived strategic need, whether that need was parity, deterrence, digital dominance, or now cognitive superiority. This structured, disciplined approach tries to ensure that technology acquisition is always married to changes in doctrine, training, and organizational structure to maximize its actual impact on capability.
Right. It perfectly reinforces that core message we found in the source material regarding the overall transformation. The institution has moved dramatically, as the sources put it, from conventional command to digital dominance. And strategically, the defense perimeter itself has expanded from just defense on land to cyber skies. The modern conflict, it seems, is fought simultaneously across physical domains like land, air, and sea, but also increasingly across the electromagnetic and data domains. They're all interconnected.
Yes, and this expansion of the battlefield is exponential. It's not linear. And it necessitates continuous, relentless transformation. There's no end point. The institution seems to understand that traditional land, air, and sea defenses are now utterly inseparable from the cyber and data infrastructure that underpins and enables them. It's become a truly symbiotic defense architecture where, in many ways, the technology is the defense, not just supporting it.
And what this entire journey demonstrates, when you look at it from start to finish, is a really powerful case study in institutional commitment to adaptation and perhaps foresight, looking ahead. It culminates in that final implication drawn from the sources that the mastery of technology is key, not just for the military, but for the transformation of a nation, becoming, as they say, disciplined and data-driven.
Okay.
And this really applies to any large organization, military or civilian, that's aiming for resilience and relevance in the 21st century's incredibly rapidly shifting technological landscape.
Absolutely. The lesson for the global learner, for anyone studying institutions or strategy, seems clear. Adaptation isn't optional anymore. It's essential for survival. And the momentum of technological adoption has to be maintained. You can't just rest on your laurels. Stopping the deterrence phase, for example, or failing to make the difficult transition from just managing digital networks to truly leveraging autonomous intelligence. That means potentially surrendering the initiative, the advantage, to those competitors or adversaries who are willing to take that next, more complex, more intellectual leap. Hashtag tagged outro.
Well, this deep dive into the technological transformation of the Pakistan Army has been, I think, a really powerful narrative. It highlights that this journey, from installing the first basic radar sets to deploying predictive AI algorithms, it's not just about acquiring advanced machines or software. It's really about achieving true mastery. Mastery over the underlying technologies, understanding them deeply, and strategically integrating them into a unified command and control structure that actually works.
Yeah, we've really watched the core concept of defense strategy evolve dramatically, moving from a focus on raw kinetic strength tanks, artillery, manpower, to emphasizing profound cognitive power, data analysis, prediction, speed of decision. We observed that difficult transition from mastering hardware, things like tanks and missiles, which provide physical leverage, to mastering these complex, often invisible domains like cyber warfare and artificial intelligence, which provide informational and, crucially, temporal advantage, being faster than the opponent.
It's a compelling demonstration, really, of how strategic foresight, when it's coupled with disciplined long-term resource allocation, can allow a large organization to continually redefine its power, its influence, its capabilities, in a constantly evolving global landscape.
And this leads us directly to our final provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider as we wrap up. We've established, based on the sources, that intelligence increasingly defines power, largely thanks to the rise of AI. So if AI is beginning to master the speed and complexity of kinetic conflict and digital warfare, what might be the next frontier of non-kinetic, perhaps even pre-kinetic conflict that strategic planners must already be thinking about, must be contemplating now? For example, if the battle for data integrity is eventually won, perhaps the ultimate strategic domain becomes something even more fundamental, like the preemptive, widespread, maybe non-attributable manipulation of foundational scientific research in competing nations. Or perhaps the subtle strategic control of global supply chains for the next generation of essential computational components, the things AI itself will rely on.
Wow. The idea that the next major conflict could potentially be won or lost in a university lab or within a complex global supply chain spreadsheet. long before a single drone is even launched. That is a truly fascinating and maybe slightly unnerving challenge for the next generation of strategic thinkers.
Well, thank you for joining us for this extensive deep dive into the evolution of defense technology through this specific lens.
Yes, we hope you walk away with a richer, more detailed, and perhaps more nuanced understanding of how technology and discipline strategy must relentlessly converge, must work together for enduring national transformation and security.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.